Hello everyone and welcome back to my video review of all the cards from Ikoria and Commander 2020. Of course, I am Raging Levine and I'm here to review every card that gets previewed during this preview season with an eye towards some casual social Commander around the middle of the road in terms of the power level. I'm not a huge fan of playing a ton of tutors or a lot of infinite combos, if that helps you understand my perspective where these reviews are coming from. So let's get started. We're going to start from Commander 2020 cards today because there are a lot of exciting cards revealed since my last review. We're starting off with Ikoria, Lair Scavenger, 2 and a black for a 2/2 legendary human cleric. Partner with Yannick, Scavenging Sentinel, Menace, and whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had one or more counters on it, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So this helps counter-based decks with Wrath Recovery. It lets graft cards like Cytoplast Rootkin really shine as they distribute their counters around the board. But where would the green come from for that, I wonder? Where would we get green for some of these standout graft cards? Well, we might get it from Ikoria's partner Yannick, Scavenging Sentinel, 2 a green and a white for a 3/3 legendary Hyena Beast. Vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, exile another creature you control until Yannick leaves the battlefield. When you do, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures, where X is the exiled creature's power. So, distributing counters obviously is great with Ikoria's ability, because when those things die, you're going to get cards, and that's good. Building around counters already makes this sort of thing easier, because not only are you activating Ikoria by having counters on things, you're also making your creatures bigger for Yannick to exile them with. And you can broaden your scope by playing cards like Abzan Ascendancy and make this whole process easier. I think there's a great +1/+1 counter deck in here, and I'm really excited to see what that looks like. Next up, we have Xyrus, the Writhing Storm, 2 a green, a blue, and a red for a legendary Snake Leviathan, a 3/5 flyer. Whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token. And whenever Xyrus deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. This is a weird one. I'm not going to say it's not, but I think it's innocuously powerful. You could lock your opponents out of drawing these extra cards with something like Narset. You could also run a lot of wheels if that's your thing. I know I say that a lot because it's sort of the obvious thing to do with a lot of these cards that ask you to have your opponents draw cards or for you to discard or draw a lot of cards at the same time. You could also run some Howling Mind effects. Temur has access to a decent amount of those thanks to blue and thanks to some of the Rites of Flourishing type effects in green. I think this card is going to be a must-kill when you see it on the battlefield. Whether it's because you don't trust the player who has the Xyrus deck to responsibly manage the Snake Engine, or whether it's because they're just giving people a bunch of cards. There's a bunch of cards being drawn, and they might be not being drawn by you, and Xyrus is a problem, and you got to get rid of it. It's a cool card. I'm interested to see how it's built around. Next up, we have Cryptic Trilobite XX for a 0/0 that enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. Oh, it's also a Trilobite, which there are not many of in Magic. You can remove a counter from it to add 2 colorless mana, two specifically colorless mana, not generic mana. Spend it only to activate abilities. I don't know how you'd add generic mana. I don't think you can do that. And then you can pay 1 and tap to put a +1/+1 counter on Cryptic Trilobite. So it grows over time, much like your Hangerback Walkers. It's got combo potential in Gave, much like most cards ever printed, most Stiff Breezes. You can combo off with Gave pretty easily. There are tons of other combos available to you as well, if that's your thing. Marath is a thing with this as well. It could be used fairly with counter synergies, but I'm sure that's not nearly as interesting to the people who are looking at Cryptic Trilobite with the combo lens on. Next up is Avenging Hunt Bonder, 3 and 2 white for a 3/3 human warrior with double strike. Whenever it attacks, you put a double strike counter on another target attacking creature. So this goes well with extra combats. It also goes well with cards with good combat damage triggers. I'm thinking here of something like Giant Ataphage. You hit him, you make a copy of Giant Ataphage, you hit him again, you make another copy of Giant Ataphage. Next turn, when you attack, you give another one of those copies of Giant Ataphage, a double strike counter, and you just keep going. This card seems great if you can take advantage of it with those big attackers or multiple attacks. Next up, we have Call the Coppercoats, 2 and a white for an instant with Strive. 1 and a white more to cast for each additional target. Choose any number of target opponents. Create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. So this is a kind of defensive reactive card. You're relying on your opponents to have big boards. It scales with extra mana. This is interesting. It's sort of a defensive option again. I'm not too wild about cards like this that are so dependent on your own board. I'd rather run something like Nomad's Assembly that depends on me having a board, because that's something I can more reliably control. I'm not here handing out a lot of tokens, and if I am, this is probably not what I'm doing. So I don't have a lot of love for Call the Coppercoats, but I'm interested to see what it does. Next up is Dismantling Wave, 2 and a white for a sorcery. For each opponent, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Now that card... the card I just read you is already good, right? You can potentially get 3 targets with this card. But if you were to cycle it, which you can do at instant speed, right? You'll be able to destroy all artifacts and enchantments. And being able to do something like that at instant speed is really remarkable. I like the flexibility of this. You might get a lot of things done by just casting it normally, but cycling, allowing you to break all the toys at instant speed by paying that full 8 mana, really, really attractive option in the late game. Next up, Herald of Forgotten. Speaking of 8 mana, 6/6 Cat Beast with flying. Whenever it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return any number of target permanent cards with cycling abilities from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, in a dedicated cycling deck, if you cast this and it resolves, enters the battlefield, you probably win the game, right? You probably win the game on the spot with all your cycling value. It's got to have this if you cast it clause, because there's so much blinking, astral sliding, astral drifting going on. We can't possibly have that happening with Herald of the Forgotten. The only way to really cheat that is to cast something like Release to the Wind after cheating into play. But at that point, I feel like you've spent enough mana and cards and time that you could probably have just paid for it. So most likely just pay for this, put it in the top end of your cycling deck. It's very powerful, not that interesting, but very powerful. Vitality Hunter, this one's more interesting. 3 and a white for a 3/4 life-linking nightmare. It's a white nightmare, so that's weird. X white monstrosity X, and when it becomes monstrous, put a lifelink counter on each of up to X target creatures. So that's pretty cool. You can send out a lot of counters, wide angle. That commander partner pair we were looking at the beginning of the video might like this, just to get counters on a lot of things. I think that's going to be one of the better parts of this card is getting counters on stuff. The actual life linking obviously is good. You get a lot of life gain related triggers. But I think Vitality Hunter's best use is going to be to make sure all your creatures have counters on them before they die to something, so you can reload, draw a bunch of cards. Crystalline Resonance, 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cycle a card, you may have Crystalline Resonance become a copy of another target permanent until your next turn, except it has this ability. So this is a very strange copy effect. It does dodge removal or death in combat by changing types at a moment's notice. As long as you have something to cycle, you can change this into whatever the best permanent at the time is, whether it's, some sort of card advantage generation engine or a big indestructible creature or something like that. You can get a lot of value out of changing what Crystalline Resonance is to fit the circumstances you're in. And if you're already doing a lot of cycling, you should just play this. Fierce Guardianship, 2 and a blue for an instant. Why does blue get the best free spell? Why is that? Because, of course, if you control a commander, you may cast this without paying its mana cost. The text is counter target non-creature spell. Overcost and negate's not even that bad, or you could think of this as bad unwind. I don't know. There are a lot of ways to think about how this card's costed. What matters is it's going to be free a lot, and it continues to protect your position of having your commander in play. That is enormous, because it lets you counter something for free, out of nowhere. Big surprise. Very strong card. I expect we're all going to get tired of this one pretty fast. So if you're thinking about which Commander 2020 deck to pick up whichever one this is in, because this card, people are going to want it. People are going to want this card, and that's going to be represented in the price, I am guessing. Next up, we have Souvenir Snatcher, 4 and a blue for a 4/4 bird. Mutate 5 and a blue. It's got flying, and whenever this creature mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact. So you can steal mana rocks with this. That's one of the things that you can do. But for 6 mana, I'm not super excited about that. I'd rather steal something like the Immortal Sun and really get somebody's value engine, steal somebody's mind's eye. That seems pretty cool. Stealing non-creature artifacts is one of the best ways to take away people's toys and use them for evil. So I like Souvenir Snatcher. I will try it out in Mutate decks. Next up, we have Dredge the Mire, 3 and a black for a sorcery. Each opponent chooses, don't like that, a creature card in their graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So you're getting 2 or 3 creatures for the price of 1 Dredge the Mire, or maybe more if you're somebody who, for some reason, plays 8-player Commander games, and if you are, more power to you. I just don't live the life that you live. Dredge the Mire is obviously fantastic. You get 1,000,000 creatures. Great. Wonderful for you. But in a more realistic 4-player game, which is what I usually think about when I think about cards like this, sure, you could spend some time reducing graveyards down to what you really want them to be with something like Withered Wretch, or you could just cast a targeted reanimation spell. You could just cast Beacon of Unrest and get the thing you want. Maybe just do that. Maybe just get the thing you want. That would be my recommendation. Cool card, though. Kind of fun. I like the flavor text a lot. It's very silly. I just don't think the card's particularly amazing. Fireflux Squad, 3 and a red for a 4/3, hasty human soldier. Whenever it attacks, you may exile another target attacking creature you control. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So if you're playing a deck that's heavy on tokens, where the actual creatures are all heavy hitters, this looks like a great way to turn a 1/1 soldier into a big attacking monstrosity. You will get an enter the battlefield trigger if it's applicable. You will not get an attack trigger because it enters the battlefield already attacking, so that's not going to be how this one works. But Fireflux Squad, I think, is a very strong card, and I'm interested to see what kind of mana-related cheats you can do by turning tokens into treasure. Not treasure tokens, like good stuff is what I mean. Next up is Lava Brink Floodgates. Oh, this card's cool. 3 and a red for an artifact. Taps to add red. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may put a Doom counter on Lava Brink Floodgates, or remove a Doom counter on it. Then, if it has 3 or more Doom counters on it, sacrifice Lava Brink Floodgates. When you do, it deals 6 damage to each creature. So, Lava Brink Floodgates only breaks when the trigger is resolving. You can't just proliferate onto it and expect it to explode, because it won't do that until the trigger happens in the next upkeep. Everybody gets to make the choice about when these floodgates break. They make it together. There's going to be a lot of push and pull. Realistically, the card's going to sit and play and make mana most of the time and not doing anything, or your opponents are going to say, all right, well, let's just blow up the board, add counter, and then all of a sudden, for no investment, they've gotten rid of your card. Fun card, creates a cool subgame, not powerful. I just want to be clear. I think the card's really cool. I'm going to play it. It looks fun. It's not powerful. Next up, we have Surly Badgersaur, 3 and a red for a 3/3 Badger Dinosaur. Whenever you discard a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever you discard a land card, create a treasure token. And whenever you discard something else, Surly Badgersaur fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Okay, so I don't know who decided we should have Red Bone Miser, but this card sure is weird. You can wheel away your hand, discard a bunch of cards, get some counters, get some treasure tokens, maybe do a little fighting because it's up to 1, so you do not have to fight. So you can just keep your Surly Badgersaur around, hurl your hand into the graveyard, make some treasure, draw some new cards, continue to wheel through your hand. Oops, I think I'm slowly inventing an Underworld Breach combo deck. Okay, so Surly Badgersaur can probably do some weird, unfair, cool stuff. I'm interested to see how that plays out, but I'm also interested to see what it does in a deck that isn't all about wheels, maybe some kind of Madness deck, even though I still think the pieces for a good Madness deck do not actually exist, and that frustrates me day in, day out. But I do think this card's really cool, and I'm really excited to see what people do with it, as I love to say, with cards like this. Slippery Bogbonder, 3 and a green for a 3/3 human druid with flash and hexproof, and whenever it enters the battlefield, put a hexproof counter on target creature. Then move any number of counters from among creatures you control onto that creature. So you're going to give something hexproof. This is a fun little trick that stops people from blowing up your creatures. It also lets you consolidate counters on that creature now that it's harder to kill. I'm thinking if you use this with something like Crystalline Giant, you can take counters off that and move them onto a stronger creature, or a creature that you want to protect in response to some sort of removal spell or something. Next up, we have Twinning Staff. 3 mana for an artifact. If you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time. You may choose new targets for the additional copy, and then 7 and tap, copy an instant or sorcery you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, if you already like copying spells, let's say you already play Ral Storm Conduit, Twinning Staff looks like a lot of fun. If you're playing something like Bonus Round, and then you copy Bonus Round, because that would be fun. You can really go off. If you're already into copying spells, you could create like a spell copying theme type deck with Twinning Staff. That looks like a lot of fun. It's absolutely win more because it relies on you already copying spells, and if you're copying spells, you're already doing what you're trying to do. So Twinning Staff, really cool, very powerful when it works. When it doesn't work, it doesn't really do anything, though. It requires a hefty mana investment if you're not already but copying spells other ways. Sanctuary Lockdown is not the next card because I've gone into the reprints. So let's just flip through these reprints real quick. Astral Drift, did mention that earlier. Eternal Dragon, great card. Animist's Awakening, pretty cool. The Locust God, always scary. Nissa Stewart Developments, I don't see her a lot. Commander's Sphere, sounds good. Fluctuator, I heard this reprint hit the speculation market pretty hard. Soul Ring, I guess you gotta have Soul Ring. Command Tower, you definitely have to have Command Tower. Next up is Sanctuary Lockdown this time. 2 and a white for an enchantment. Humans you control get +1/+1. Pay 2 and tap 2 untapped humans you control. Tap target creature and opponent's control. So we have another humans-focused card. Maybe it's time for Innistrad's humans to join up with Ikoria's and get some Abzan goodness going. Because that one white and black commander we saw just wasn't that inspiring. The activated ability on this isn't great. It's a nice little anthem effect. But in a Abzan Humans deck, I would just play Glare of Subdual instead of being subjected to this activated ability. And so I'd just be using it for the anthem, at which point there are a lot of other cards that you could play, like Etchings of the Chosen. Capture Sphere, it's a reprint, and it continues to tell the story of another card that we'll see a little later. Sea Dasher Octopus, 1 and 2 blue for a 2/2 octopus, or mutate 1 and a blue rather. It's got Flash, so you can mutate it at instant speed. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Okay, so this looks like a tournament constructed type of card to me. That said, it's got a very cheap mutate. That helps with whenever this mutates type of effects. Mutating at instant speed means that you can put it on an unblocked creature, very much reminiscent of Ninja of the Deep Hours. This card keeps getting better the longer I look at it. Also, the art is wonderful. Okay, this card's definitely good in mutate decks, in decks that want to draw cards by dealing combat damage. I like this. I like this card. This card goes a lot of places, and I'm interested to see what it does. Cathartic Reunion, looks like that's what happens after the Capture Sphere. Forbidden Friendship, and it looks like this is the prelude. So this one's not a reprint. 1 and a red for a sorcery. Create a 1/1 red dinosaur creature token with haste and a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So this is a funny card. Worse creature types than something like Krenko's Command, but one of the creatures does get haste. This card's mostly just adorable. I really do love it. It makes me very happy. It's not as good as other red token-making sorceries that will compete for its spot. Unless, for some reason, you need a white creature along with your red dinosaur with haste. The haste may matter, but I'd rather have goblins most of the time. Go for Blood, 1 and a... I love how I said that in kind of a like CB radio voice. Go for Blood. Yes, please. This is Blood calling. Please call back. I don't know. That just felt weird to me. Rather, okay, go for Blood. Let's get back on track. 1 and a red for a sorcery. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So it's Prey Upon with Cycling 1. Cycling 1's pretty good. I like having that. Go for Blood costs a lot of mana, though, for its effect. So, Exuberant Wolf Bear. Well, this card is beautiful and must be protected. I love it very much. 3 and a green for a Wolf Bear. It's a 4/4. Whenever it attacks, you may change the base power and toughness of target human you control to Exuberant Wolf Bear's power and toughness until end of turn. So, looks like a limited card. Not an amazing commander card, but I do like it. There are some ways I guess you could use it. You could upgrade Champion of Lamholt's base stats, or in a really wild scenario I thought up, you could attack with this, target Shaman of Forgotten Ways to get to exactly 8 power, and then activate Shaman of Forgotten Ways, keeping in mind that that activation costs 11 mana for Biorhythm fun times. Now, you'd have to do a lot of other work to make Biorhythm good here, because it sounds like in this situation you only have 2 creatures, and my hand has already skipped us forward to thwart the enemy, probably to protect me from talking about Exuberant Wolf Bear for the next 19 hours. Thwart the enemy, 2 and a green, instant, prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. Didn't we see this spell already? Wasn't it free if you controlled your commander? Next question. Frondland Felidar, 2, a green and a white for a 3/5 Cat Beast. Cat Beast? Sure, I guess. Looks like a fox beast, but sure. I don't know. It's got Vigilance, and creatures you control with Vigilance, including this one, have pay 1 and tap to tap target creature. It's a good Frond, but that's about it. I'd, again, rather play Glare of Subdual. I guess if you have a critical mass of Vigilant creatures, you can attack and then also play a very affirmative defense. But, again, Glare of Subdual, Opposition, the list goes on. Well, no, it really doesn't. Those are kind of the 2 good ones. Lore Dracus, 1, a blue and a red for a 2/3 Lizard Beast with Mutate for 2 hybrid Isn't Mana. Whenever this creature mutates, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So we've got repeatable spell recursion if you want to commit to mutate, or not repeatable if you don't, at a pretty reasonable cost. More regrowth effects like this are always good for the blue-red spells decks. I think Lore Dracus is going to have quite a few homes in decks like those. The problem, of course, being that you have to mutate it onto something, which necessitates having creatures, which those spell-slinging decks don't always have readily available. Alrighty, that is it for today. Thanks for checking out the video. Don't forget to press all the good buttons, and I'll see you next time.